In this video, we'll see how to deploy a React application using Docker. Specifically, we will create the React application using Vite. And the nice thing is that the target computer doesn't even have to have Node installed. All it needs is Docker, and that's about it. So let's start, and I'm going to start by creating a new React application. So here from Visual Studio Code, let me open the terminal, and I'm simply going to run npm create Vite to create my new React application. I'll name my project React Test. Here I'll choose React, and as for the language, I'll go with JavaScript. And let's install with npm and start now. And we need to give it a second. And if I now click on the link here, I can see the application that was just created. Let me now open the new React Test folder in Visual Studio Code. So code React Test, just like this. And to containerize our application, we need to create a new Dockerfile. So it's a capital D and then Dockerfile. So this is the new file. Now our Docker build is going to comprise two stages. It's going to be what's known as multi-stage. So first, we're going to use a temporary container that will only be used during the build that we are defining now. And since this is a React project, this stage 1 temporary container is going to be a node container. So it's going to be based on a node image. And this is why here I'm going to write from node. So we are defining a new image that's based on the node image, and I can specify the version of node I want. You can definitely go with latest, but for this example, I'm going to go with 25.1. And of course, you can choose whatever version of Node you want. Next, we need to define the work directory of this new temporary container. This can be done using the workdir command. And the widely used option for the working directory is /app, like this. Now, I want you to notice that I created the Dockerfile at the root of my folder. So it's not inside the source folder, it's not inside the public folder, it's not inside anything. It's in the root of the project. And this is going to make it very easy for me to copy everything from this folder to my container. And the thing is that we actually want all of these files in the container because all of these might be needed to successfully run our React application. And this is why I want to copy all of the content from the root folder to the container. This can be done using the command copy. So I want to copy all of the content of this folder, so dot, and once again, notice that I am counting on the fact that the Dockerfile is in the root of the folder. And this is why dot is the current folder, which basically contains everything we can see here. Now, where is the target? Where do we want to copy these files to? And the answer is once again going to be dot. And dot, in this sense, is the work directory in the container, right? So we defined our work directory in the container to be this folder, and everything, all of these files and folders will be copied from here to the work directory in the container. But now I want to present here a very important optimization. We're actually going to break this into two different stages. First, we're only going to copy the package.json file along with the package lock to the container. And the reason we're going to start with these two files is because these files define the dependencies. So every dependency, every npm pack that our React application uses is defined here in package.json. So we're going to start by copying these two files. Then we're going to install all of the dependencies on the container. So to copy these two files, it's going to look like this. Copy, and then package star, and star here is the wildcard. It can be either nothing or it can be -lock.json. So copy these two files to the work directory in the container. Now we're going to be able to install all of the dependencies in the container. And to do that, I'm going to run npm install. The importance of separating these two lines stems from the fact that Docker builds are done in stages, done in layers. And the meaning is that if we're now making any changes to our application during development, and we want to create an updated Docker image, as long as the dependencies for the project did not change, which means that package.json did not change, then this step will not rerun. Docker will recognize that this file did not change, and as a result, it does not need to reinstall all of the dependencies. So the only thing it is going to do is this, which copies the rest of the files. So for example, if you changed an image, right, it's something that appears here in the public folder, but you didn't change any of the dependencies, so it does not need to copy the updated package.json file because it didn't change. And on top of that, the npm dependencies did not change as well. And as a result, it does not need to run npm install all over again. And this will significantly shorten the time needed to create new images of new versions of your application. After we finish copying over all of the files to the container, we can run the npm script to build the production version of the application. Now, as you might remember, in most React applications we have here in package.json this npm script, the build script. And this is the one that converts our React application to actual deliverables. So after we do that, we will have a project that only contains HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So this step is very important, especially for production. And if we want to execute this step on the container, it's going to look like this. Run, and then npm run build. So this will run the build npm script on the container. This is the first stage. Once we are done with this, especially this line, we're going to end up with a production version of the React application, which can actually be deployed for production. So now we're going to move on to the second stage. The second stage is focused on production deployment. And this is why we need a reliable web server. So this second step is going to be based on Nginx. So from Nginx. And I'm going to use the Alpine variant because this tag of the image is really lightweight and reliable. And this is the image that the end user actually cares about, in the sense that they will end up with a container of the Nginx image. So now we need to copy all of the files that we created in the first stage in the node container. We need to copy them to this new container, to the Nginx container. So once again, we're going to use the copy command, but notice that now we are copying from one container to another container, to a different container. Now, the source container is this one, right? The node container. This is the source. And to be able to copy from a different container, we have to give a name to this first container. And this is why here I'm going to write as. This allows me to give an alias to this container so that I can use it later and specify it as the source for the copy. Now, a good name for this container might be build, because the first node container is focused on building our application. Now I can go back to this command, and now I can use the -- from flag, and this is going to be this container, right? The build container. Now it has an alias called build, and we're going to use this alias here. And this lets the build process know that we are copying files from a different container, specifically from the build container, which is the node container. Now we need to specify the folder in the source container from which we want to copy. And this is going to be app/dist. And the reason for that is that React applications that are created or built using Vite create the production deliverables in a subfolder called dist. So after we finish building the application right here in this command, using the npm build script, the resulting files can be found in the dist subfolder. So app, which is the working directory, /dist. And I want to copy all of the files from this folder to a folder in the current container, which is the Nginx container. And here we need to specify the HTML folder, which is the folder that is served by the Nginx container. So USR share Nginx HTML. This is the folder that the Nginx container serves. So we had to copy all of the files from this folder in the node container to this folder in the Nginx container. Now we need to expose port 80 in the Nginx container. So expose 80. And this is of course the port that Nginx uses to serve its files. And eventually we want Nginx to start in the target machine. So after our Docker user creates the Nginx container, we want Nginx to actually start within the container. And this is something we can specify using the command. So command Nginx, and I also specified here the -g flag with daemon off. So we are done with defining our Dockerfile, but we're still missing one more thing. And this is to define our Dockerignore file. This is needed because we don't actually want to copy all of the files that we have here to the container. Some of the files and folders here are not really needed in the container. And the biggest example is this folder, the node modules folder. We don't want to copy the content of this folder to the container that we are creating because we are generating the content of this folder using this command, npm install. So all of the dependencies will be installed on the container and don't need to be copied over from the host machine. So this is something we need to define in the Dockerignore file. So let me create a new file, and once again it's going to be in the root of the project, and I'm going to call it .dockerignore, just like this. So what do we want to ignore? First we want to ignore node modules, but this is not the only thing. The dist folder. And this is needed because if in my host I'm going to build my project, I'm going to run npm run build, new dist folder will be created here, right? Do you remember this, what we had here? This is something that we are running in the container to create the dist folder in the container. But if we ran the same command on the host, this folder would be created here on the host. And of course, we don't want to copy this folder to the container. We want it to be created. We want it to be built on the container separately. So of course, we don't want to copy the dist folder, and this is why it also has to appear here in our .dockerignore file. I'm also going to specify here .git, because this might be a big folder, and we usually take care of version control in the development computer, and not in the deployment container. And eventually, I'm also going to specify here the Dockerfile itself and the .dockerignore file. These two files are needed for the management of the container, and the container itself doesn't have much to do with them. So now that we have our Dockerfile, and also we have everything that we specified here in the .dockerignore file, we are ready to move on to the creation of our Docker image. Let's start by listing the Docker images we currently have, and this can be done using docker image ls, and these are the images that I currently have, and now we're going to create a new one. So to do that, I'm going to run docker build -t, and then we need to give a name to the new image that we are about to create, and I'm just going to call it React test, and then space dot, and this is because our Docker file is in the same folder as the folder that we are currently in. If the Docker file was in a different folder, we had to specify the relative path. This will build our Docker image. So it's going through the build process and it's done. Let's try to list our Docker images again. So docker image ls. And we can see that now we have a new Docker image called React test. Now we are going to upload our Docker image to Docker Hub. So let's go to hub.docker.com, just like this, hub.docker.com. And from here, we're going to create a repository. So let's choose this option. And we need to give a name to the new repository. I'm going to call mine React test. And this is going to be a public repository. So let's create. And it was created. This repository doesn't contain anything yet, but it's already here. What I'm going to do now is copy the name of this repository. So it's my username / and then the name of this specific repository. So let's copy the full name of this repository and let's run docker image ls once again. And now I want to rename this image. So this can be done using the docker tag command. So docker tag, then I'm going to specify the name that it currently has, which is React test space, and here I'm going to paste the name of my repository. So it was my username on Docker Hub / React test. And let's try to list our Docker images now. And we can see that this image now has two different names, right? This is the name it used to have, and this is the new name. We can see that it has the same ID, the same image ID. So both of these refer to the same Docker image. But now it has this name, and this step is necessary so we can upload the image to Docker Hub. What I'm going to do now is docker login, just like this. And I am already logged in. If you are not logged in, this will allow you to log in with the browser. And now that I made sure that I am logged in, and I also made sure that my image on my computer matches the name of the public repository that I just created, now I can run docker push. So let's list the images again. And now I can run docker push, followed by the name of the repository. So let me copy this and paste it here. And let's run this command. And it's now pushing the image to Docker Hub. Okay, and it's done. Let's go back to Docker Hub and let's refresh the page. And we can see that this image is now actually here as part of this repository. Now we can go to the target computer. I'm going to use a GitHub code space as an example, but it can be any computer that has Docker installed on it. And now here, from this computer, I'm going to run docker run. And of course, we're going to use port forwarding, so -p. And on this computer, on this code space, I'm going to use, as an example, port 8080. And of course, this port has to be forwarded to port 80 on the container, so :80. And then I need to specify my Docker image. So back from here, from Docker Hub, I'm going to once again copy the name of my repository. So let's copy this and let's paste it here. And let's run this command. So it's downloading the image. And now it's creating a container based on this image. And we can see that the application is served on port 8080. So let's open in browser. And we can see that the React application is served from the remote computer.